Smaulgld.
Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is already March 5th, 2019, and tonight's topic is JP Morgan causing a Litecoin shortage. We're going to get to that later on the program after we go through the gold and silver prices, some stories of the day, some gold stories, some crypto stories. Then we're going to answer the question whether JP Morgan is causing a Litecoin shortage. All right, well, let's see what happened in the markets today. Dow Jones down 13 points. Not a big deal. Pretty much flat for the Dow Jones. And it was pretty much the same thing for all the equity markets across the board. NASDAQ down 0.02%, essentially flat. Holding at 75.76. S&P 500 down 0.11%, and that's at 27.89. The dollar index is at 96.88. All right, Smaulgld mug stackers and game changers. Let's take a look at the precious metals and see where they ended up today. As we mentioned, the equity markets, very little movement today. There was a little movement, however, in the gold price today. 64 cents worth of movement. Gold closed at 1287, pretty much flat, and right now it's at 1288.30, so up $1 since the close. Pretty non-eventful day in the equity markets and the precious metal markets. They might as well not trade it at all today where they finished up. Silver, same thing, up 4 cents. Big move for silver when it goes up 4 cents, though. That's up 0.25%. Closed at 15.12. Lost a cent in after hours, but that big move for silver today pushed the gold-silver ratio down just a little bit, down to 85.25 to 1. And there's your gold-silver ratio. Let's see what other gold and silver stories we have for today. There was just a little, there was one on Italy here. Italy's gold reserves belong to gold. The central bank, Bank of Italy's governor, Ignazio Visco, said on Monday the country's reserves of gold belong to the central bank and could not be used to fund the government. Very interesting concept that the gold belongs to the central bank. The central bank is owned by the government, but you can't use the gold to fund the government. It's interesting. The U.S. Fed is not owned by the government. It's a private bank, and yet, in some respects, when it monetizes debt, it funds the government. So who knows how these arrangements work out, but that is an interesting story there for Italy to make that, or the Bank of Italy to make that statement. Let's move over to cryptos. Now, it was a big day in cryptocurrencies today. Litecoin up over 16%. At 51.61, it gotten as high as like 53.50. Bitcoin at 38.26, that's up 4%. Ethereum at 135, up 10%. That had gone up as high as I think 138%. Bcash also at 130, up 8%. So a big day for the cryptocurrencies. No particular news out driving. I saw one accounting for the Litecoin rise of 16-17%. So no fundamentals, it's purely technical. I would love to be able to know when there's a technical indicator that would just indicate a 17% rise in one day. But I guess it's just like with the equities. You really can't predict and you really can't ascribe generally a reason for price movements in most asset classes. All right, let's take a look at some of the other stories in the crypto space. There are quite a few today. Let's take a look. The other night we were talking about Circle. Now Circle is partially funded by Goldman Sachs and some other investors, and there was a story saying that they had wanted to raise $250 million. Like, why would they want to do that? Well, Circle here is talking about they bought a company, Seed Invest, operator of a registered broker-dealer, currently at the forefront of enabling startups to raise capital directly from investors over the internet. And you say, well, of course, yeah, Goldman Sachs, they would want to own part of a broker-dealer. You say, wait a minute, they already are a broker-dealer. They can help raise capital from investors, and that's what they do when they sponsor IPOs. But here, this company that they're buying, and it's not just Goldman Sachs, they're one of the investors in Circle, which, by the way, also owns Poloniex, a crypto trading platform. So Goldman Sachs is, I wouldn't say knee-deep in crypto, but they have their oars in the water here with this Circle company. And what the Seed Invest company does that Circle bought, which means Goldman Sachs has an indirect interest in it, is they raise capital directly from investors over the internet, so they don't go through the whole rigmarole of the way Goldman Sachs contacts its investors. This is somewhat of a crowdfunding platform, and they notice this acquisition is a further step towards realizing a vision of a more open, global, connected, and inclusive financial system. As we join with their incredible community of investors and companies, this is the key here, we will begin to explore future opportunities enabled by asset tokenizations. So ICOs, or pretty much whatever they're going to call them. This is how funds will be raised in the future. The SEC has talked about this. They actually have a page up on their website on how to do it. They want people to raise capital in these, quote, innovative ways, online and so on. They just want the rules to be followed. And they have a page called sec.gov/ICO. So this is, again, one of the types of things where it's obvious to me, just from following it, that Wall Street is already all over the crypto space. You just don't hear much about it. And, of course, they do it through intermediaries like Circle. And here's Circle talking about Goldman Sachs as a part owner of Circle. And here's their announcement today. We're delighted to officially welcome Seed Invest to the Circle family. And, again, after receiving approval from FINRA, which I believe is the FINRA, I think, is the UK regulatory body. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. All right. What else is going on with in the crypto space? Well, we mentioned Kraken. We didn't mention Kraken. We mentioned Poloniex. So Kraken is a competitor. Futures trading near 1 billion in first month on Kraken crypto exchange. So because they had purchased a company called Crypto Facilities, which provides futures data to the CME group. See the connections here? Says saw its own trading volume jump fivefold after being acquired by Kraken, or Kraken, whatever it's called. You can see how they're all interconnected. There's big money in this space. No one's talking about it. The price hasn't reflected it yet. Maybe never will, but my point is there's a lot of moving going on here. Bitcoin miners now are investing again, expecting a cheap power boom. So remember, they go where the cheap power is. A lot of that is in China. Venezuela also has cheap power. Speaking of Venezuela, Circle Research. We heard of them before. We were just talking about them. Goldman Sachs is invested in Circle. This week, we take a look at Bitcoin use in Venezuela. So they actually have a research group looking at Bitcoin use in Venezuela, while there is much work to do before crypto is widely accepted. So they view that as their mission, to get crypto widely accepted. Isn't that interesting? The Goldman Sachs funded company considers its work to do is to get crypto widely adopted. It's exciting to hear about instances where people are turning to Bitcoin and crypto as a way to safeguard their wealth. Very interesting indeed. Circle Research. That's one of their missions. They get people to use Bitcoin. Speaking of getting people to use Bitcoin, what about Bakkt? Well, details are emerging now that Bakkt, which we've talked about, is backed by the owners of the New York Stock Exchange, the Intercontinental Exchange, Microsoft, Boston Consulting, and Starbucks. And Starbucks is the part of the entity which has since raised in December $187 million additional dollars. Starbucks is a part of the entity that is going to help drive adoption of Bitcoin usage. So the platform is supposed to be a futures platform when it launches that will allow people or investors who trade on the futures market to take, quote, delivery of their Bitcoin in, quote, physical form, most likely, and they also provide a storage facility. Now, most likely people will take delivery through their storage facility. So in other words, just like on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, you withdraw, but you keep it in the system. So they'll put, if you have a winning trade on Bitcoin, you will then withdraw it and take delivery, but you probably won't take it delivery meaning you won't have it shipped to you and put on one of your storage devices. You will just keep it there. But that's part one of it, to allow customers to do that. The other, to have a futures trading platform. Second part is to allow them to store it. The third part is to help them spend their Bitcoin. And apparently the reason Starbucks is involved is the press releases and the talk around this new backed entity, which is supposed to launch in December but didn't because they didn't get the regulatory approval yet. Then they used the time to go out and raise money and then to do more acquisitions. Then the government shut down. They're claiming they could launch in March, but clearly they're saying they're going to launch this year. The purpose of Starbucks, and they said they're not going to accept Bitcoin directly, and we see no merchant really accepts Bitcoin directly. They accept it through a payment processor whereby you pay in Bitcoin through the payment processor. The payment processor figures out the amount that you owe for the coffee. They collect that amount of Bitcoin, and then they ship the fiat dollars or whatever currency it is to the merchant or to Starbucks. And Starbucks apparently is an investor in this particular entity backed. But according to these sources, they say that they didn't put any money in, but they have an equity stake in it. So not sure how that's all going to work out, knowing it's all speculation. So I did a little speculating myself today on backed. And I asked, what if backed Bitcoin spending solution, as they say, involves storing Bitcoin but converting some of it to Litecoin in order to pay with Litecoin? Now, why do I say that? Well, we know that all these financial institutions, these big, everything runs on leverage. So we know that if you have a storage facility with gold in it, the temptation there is, well, especially in a pooled account, is that not everyone's going to come and collect their gold on one particular day. So they have ratios they figure out where they don't always have to have unencumbered gold in the vault in order to satisfy people who may do redemptions. A lot of people buy gold, they set and forget it. They don't all go to sell at once. And so they know that they can do some type of fractional reserve, or they can lend some of that gold out. They can do a lot of different things. They can sell it and buy it back. Who knows? But the point is that there doesn't always seem to be a one-to-one correspondence once you start dealing with these more, quote, sophisticated entities that aren't just bailments. Now, in a bailment, you can't do that. A bailment arrangement is where you go and you pay somebody to store your gold, your furniture, whatever it is. They can't lend it out. They can't sell it. It's there. You're paying them to store it. Most of these arrangements, that's not what they are. Those are not bailments. When you buy ETFs, they're not holding your gold. There's not even allocated any to you. And I would imagine with this backed, it'd be the same thing. Well, you can get your Bitcoin after a futures trading win, but most likely what you'll do is you'll store it with backed. So now backed will have all the keys, and they will have your Bitcoin being held for you. And I'm sure if you want to go get it, they will send it to you. But for the most part, the way traders are, they'll leave it there. And this will be probably in some type of cold storage, as it seems that it's a storage facility, there's a separate trading facility. So if you collect your winnings and you decide to, quote, take delivery, you may take delivery of it by taking delivery of it into backed storage facility. Now, what they've said back in the fall when they were at one of these conferences, the executives of Backed, was that they were going to only start with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the one. Bitcoin's been around the longest. There's the most security around Bitcoin, and that's what they were going to do. And this is just speculation. They haven't said anything about this. The reason I say they may decide to open also with Litecoin as the spending solution, in that a lot of, as I mentioned, investors may take their delivery of the Bitcoin into the back facility, and they may not want to take that Bitcoin out and spend it. But one thing that would be very helpful to Backed, if they did want to have some flexibility and not having to enable them to have some flexibility to do what they want to a certain extent with some of the Bitcoin in the storage facility, would be to make sure not only to understand how often investors would actually pull the money outside of the storage, the Bitcoin outside the storage system, but to allow them, instead of taking it out in Bitcoin, because if they're going to spend it, maybe they take it out and they offer them a facility where they can take it out in Litecoin and the equivalent value from Bitcoin to Litecoin. Now that would be akin to, but not really the same as settling in cash. When they say, well, we don't have the gold, we'll give you the cash. They're not, I would imagine a structure like this wouldn't be, we're not going to give you the Bitcoin, we're going to settle you in Litecoin. That would be probably fraudulent. But if they did offer instead, let's say somebody makes a big win and they get to 20 Bitcoin, and maybe they don't want to take a whole Bitcoin out because at the time it might be worth $6,000. Maybe they want $600 and they can get that in Litecoin. And then if Bakkt ran its inventory properly, they can have a Litecoin pile. Now, the reason I suggest that this is possible, and this is 100% speculation, and I'm not touting this as a theory, is we saw that Litecoin is actually, the ownership of Litecoin in the last year has become much more concentrated than any of the other coins. I think the top 5 or 6 wallets hold 40% of the Litecoin. They've been accumulating this, and I would imagine someone large, I mean, it just could be an investor, but it would make sense for an entity that wanted to have a lot of Litecoin in order to distribute, and then it could be backed. I don't know if that is, but if the investors take the Bitcoin futures and then they take delivery and store it back and have a conversion facility to take some Litecoin to use at Starbucks, this way the Bitcoin doesn't have to be withdrawn, and that would explain that big accumulation in the past 6 months of the 5 largest Litecoin wallets. And I mentioned it could lead to this whole fractional reserve style Bitcoin, but that's how things work. Companies know that when they're storing assets that are fungible, that as long as they can always make delivery of the limited number of redemptions that they have, they generally don't have a problem. And no one really knows the difference because if it's just like your bank does not have enough cash, probably even to cover the top 20 accounts at your branch. At the time, if I've heard people, they go in, they want to get out like $5,000. They don't even have it there because most people don't take out $5,000. There's a lot of accounts that have over $5,000, I'm sure, but they don't take it out. And as long as you can get your cash when you ask for it, I think you have to make an appointment to get your cash or something like that. Might be the same with the Bitcoin, but they can alleviate any, quote, run on the Bitcoin by offering, not as a settlement procedure, but as an accommodation or an option, the ability to take Litecoin. Because you could just as easily use Litecoin to spend as you can in Bitcoin. That's the main reason why they set up, Charlie set up Litecoin, was to do that. So that's just speculation. Let me know what you guys think. And the reason I was speculating that the price of normally the price of cryptocurrencies just follows what Bitcoin does, more or less. But we've seen in the last 3 months, Litecoin just take off on its own. And I'm not quite sure for what particular reason why Litecoin would just take off. And it could be, I don't know, that there's something to do with Bakkt. It could have nothing to do with Bakkt. Again, it's speculation. When I speculate, I clearly stated speculation. I don't just come out and start saying this is happening and you got to do this or that. But here's another story here, which ties into my theory that Wall Street, the payment system, Silicon Valley, they're all surrounding and trying to corral Bitcoin. Well, we mentioned there's a U.S. crypto exchange called ErisX. That's set up by TD Ameritrade. I think Fidelity has a stake in it. Well, they hired former Wells Fargo executive as a business developer. Now, isn't that convenient to bring in Wells Fargo banking executive when you're dealing, when Wells Fargo has Visa cards? I mean, when you're dealing with cryptocurrencies, you're bringing in the banking. Speaking of Visa cards, take a look at this one. There's a company called 10X. They allow you to load up your cryptocurrencies onto a Visa card, and then they facilitate that, and you can spend your cryptocurrencies. The merchant has no idea that they're even accepting cryptocurrencies because they're doing it through Visa. So again, this is not just the other night we were talking about how Visa could be outdone by cryptocurrencies because of the fees, and we used the Netflix versus Blockbuster analogy, but it could be possible also that Visa could incorporate cryptocurrencies, as they have in that example, into their system and essentially just absorb it into the system. Here's 10x, the company that does that. They're now shipping to users residing in Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. Join the revolution. Get your card now. Not sure what's revolutionary about that because it's still a Visa card, but it does tie into my concept that Bitcoin and Litecoin and cryptocurrencies would be absorbed into the current payment systems, the current banking systems. Now, I know a lot of people that are die-hard anarcho-capitalists, libertarians that are initial adopters of Bitcoin. They don't like that because they say they see no need for that, and they just want everyone to be their own central bank and central banks to go away. You can still use Bitcoin and Litecoin in its intended peer-to-peer. That's not going to stop the financial institutions, Wall Street, banks, Silicon Valley, accountants, lawyers from figuring out ways, anything that's valuable, they can get their mitts on, and they can bring it into the system. They can financialize it. You can see they could do futures on it. It's all happening. So I don't think a lot of people, the other side of the argument is that the governments are going to crack down. No, they're not. The banks and the financial institutions and all of the silicon, they figured out that this is a gold mine for them, literally, even though it's a crypto mine. They're just working with the regulators to figure out how they can get this stuff under their umbrella so they could start making fortune doing all of these types of platforms and transactions and storage systems and payment systems, because that's where the money is, and they know it. They always have to find the next bubble, and I think this is what they're putting their money on. Now, speaking of the Lightning Network, which we weren't, but we're going to do it now, the Bitcoin Lightning Network now tops 7,000 nodes. They were like 5,000 6 weeks ago. You got 32,000 channels. You can now run about 750 Bitcoin through the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is necessary because Bitcoin is a bit slow, but through Lightning Network you can transact off-chain, record it later. But that 753 Bitcoin is, is about $2.8 million worth. Now the Litecoin Lightning Network is less developed, but that's because currently it doesn't even need to be on the Lightning Network, because currently Litecoin is faster. It has 10 times fewer the amount of transactions at any given point. It runs blocks more often. It just doesn't need the Lightning Network right now. However, if transactions start to really ramp up and Litecoin's transactions increase tenfold and Bitcoin's transactions increase tenfold, well, then all of a sudden Lightning might start to be necessary for Litecoin as well. All right, let's see if there's any more in the crypto here. We still got to answer that question, whether JP Morgan is causing a Litecoin shortage. Yes, indeed. And there's just a story here today from CoinDesk noting, which I find odd, that Litecoin, once again, one of the best performing large cap cryptocurrency, just reached a price of $53.98, highest since November. And then it says Litecoin's trend is clearly more bullish than Bitcoin's. The question is, will Bitcoin fall? And that indeed is the question. And the question is, why is Litecoin ramping out in front of the other cryptocurrencies? All right. Now, let us move on to China. Don't forget China. Kyle Bass was out today. He got some play. He was saying that trade deal with China must address the IP theft. They're stealing our game from us. He says that's the most important thing, and he's right. It's not that the United States does a lot of labor. It's the United States has a lot of intellectual capital, so he's complaining about that. And in China, news in China, China's fallen back on the old if you have economic woes, build railways. So in 2018, they built an additional 4,100 kilometers of rail, and they've got plans to do even more. Check this out. They're going to invest 800 billion yuan in railway construction and 1.8 trillion yuan in highway and waterway construction. So they clearly have taken the government spending and the public works as a way of continuing to push their economy forward. And of course, big state-owned banks are plan to increase lending to small firms by 30%. That's another way you can grow your economy. Just lend more money to support big banks and replenish capital via multiple channels to encourage long-term lending to manufacturing. Now, it doesn't matter whether there's a need for more manufacturing. If you can lend more money and they can build more capacity, well, then they can make more stuff and worry about whether they can sell it later. Well, that's where China is, and they are well out in front of the borrow money to make money. Another question here, Michael Leibowitz asks. So the question no one is asking, if U.S.-China reach a trade deal, and China buys more U.S. goods, how will other countries that lose exports to China react? Now, the idea there, he says, smells like the potential for a global trade war is coming soon. Now, the assumption in that question is that it is I suppose, a zero-sum game where if China has to import more goods from the U.S., well, therefore, they're going to import fewer goods from somewhere else. And I'm sure that's the case. And I don't have the complete list in front of me, but obviously Brazil sells soybeans to China. Well, if there's only a certain number of soybeans that you need in China, if they buy a lot of them from the U.S., they may have to cut back on Brazil. Russia, I mean, if they buy oil from the U.S., natural gas, which they already do, maybe they buy more, maybe they buy less from Russia. That's possible. But then again, I was thinking some of the goods that they're going to buy are things like whiskey and blue jeans. Yeah, maybe you buy Jack Daniels, more Jack Daniels, and maybe they buy less Scotch whiskey. Maybe not, because those are actually two different. They may have some overlap in the market, but I don't think there's people who drink Jack Daniels to the exclusion of single malt or vice versa. They might, but But then the point is it possible the net loss would not be felt so much by other countries, but by the Chinese domestic producers? And here's how China might be able to see. Michael is looking at it as the other countries are going to be pissed off that they're going to lose this, then they're going to blame the United States. And that is a possibility. I mean, I don't know, but I think it's more likely that what's going to happen is the imports are going to cut into what China already produces. It produces at a subsidy. Now, if that happens, then China has a problem, because the companies are going to either have to be subsidized, lent more money or whatever, or they're going to go out of business. Now, China's not going to let their own companies go out of business, because then they're going to have riots. And so these people have to be kept employed. So what they could do is import the U.S. goods and continue to support the manufacturing at home of the goods that they import, the same goods that they may import from the United States. And then they're going to have to find buyers for them externally, maybe at a loss. Who knows? So I'm not quite sure Michael's point is correct, that the United States is going to be cutting into other countries' trade with China. They may be cutting into, and I don't know the answer to this, but I just throw this out there, that the United States might be cutting into China's domestic production, and that might cause China bigger problems internally rather than causing the U.S. problems with the rest of the world. But who knows? One other thing on China, I was thinking about this today. A lot of this green energy stuff really relies upon non-green type energy, because while solar and wind and electrical stuff is supposedly sustainable and it's green, there's still a lot of economic and ecological damage done by these. They may not be fossil fuels, although some electricity, a good portion of electricity, is generated through the burning of coal. But put that aside. If you can move that over to solar And to wind turbines, you still have the issue that you have to destroy the environment to put these things up. And I don't know if you've ever seen those large solar farms. Those are huge, and you have to take up a lot of land. And then the wind things, they're up there humming away, and they kill birds. So it's not a let's just move over to an eco-friendly way of generating electricity. And the other thing about electrical battery style energy in cars and so on is you need cobalt. Very rare mineral. Most of it's in the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa. There's a few other places in the world, but nothing compares to you, Sharon O'Connor. Nothing compares to the amount that's in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And China is heavily invested there and operates, it looks like, some of these places. And apparently, there is child cobalt miners. There's a lot of abuse going on. There was a story in the Daily Mail. I don't know how they do these exposés, but apparently the children are not in good shape there in China as they operate the cobalt mines. They claim there's 40,000 kids working in these mines, and they spoke to a company, a Chinese company there, and they said, this is a quote, "It would be irresponsible to stop using child labor." And their rationale was they were doing it for the kids, because if they didn't have these jobs, then they would starve. And anyway, just pointing out here that there's no such thing as clean energy, ethical energy. Someone pays for it somewhere, somehow, the environment or individuals. Now, what else do we got before we get into whether JP Morgan is causing a Litecoin shortage and causing Litecoin to skyrocket? 2020, the other night, we went through the group of people running for president. It was quite a long list there. Some of the names you may recognize, some you may not. Cory Booker, Julian Castro, John Delaney, Tulsi Gabbard, Kamala Harris, John Hickenlooper, Jay Inslee, Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Marianne Williamson, Andrew Yang. Good collection of senators and governors there with varying name recognition. And then last night we mentioned there's still far more that may jump into the ring. And I mentioned Joe Biden, Andrew Cuomo, Michael Bloomberg, Hillary Clinton, Gillibrand, de Blasio, and Schultz. What we learned today: scratch Hillary Rodham Clinton off the list. Says she's not running for president. Now, I would believe the only way she would ever run would be, and this happens often, and it's quite possible, I haven't heard anyone discuss this, is that if you have 13, 15 people running and you go to the convention and no one's even close to having 50%, and you have to have this brokered convention. Now, Hillary probably doesn't have the stamina to do another coast-to-coast campaign, but she could. If they're unable to come up with a nominee, they might say, okay, why don't you just stride in here and become the nominee? Not predicting that, but that is a possibility. So even if someone says they're not running, doesn't mean that they would not accept the nomination. Now, you may recall Lyndon Johnson in 1968 said he wasn't running and he would not seek nor would he accept the nomination of his party. So that meant he was going to sit it out and he wasn't going to take a nomination even if the Democrats were unable to come up with a candidate at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968, which they did come up with one. They came up with Herbert Humphrey. Also, finally, scratch off Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg says, sorry, not going to do it, but he will instead help fund an effort to elect the Democrats. So that's what's going on in 2020. And now, I saw this today. I can't remember who posted it. Brought to my attention by Mark Battaglia. A person had posted that, well, let's just get into it. I don't want to give away too much about this particular post I saw. Remember, we're going to talk about JP Morgan and the potential for a Litecoin shortage. Game changer. But first, let's do this. We're going to do this. We really are. But it's going to take another 3. All right, here we go.
Uh-oh. We got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent.
This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
Uh-oh. Now, AP story tweeted out today. United Nations senior UN environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming is not taken care of. Now, you say, well, why is that moronic? Well, wait till you see the next slide. That was a story from 1989. You say, well, of course, they knew about global warming back then. But the story read, UN predicts disaster if global warming not checked, 1989. But then when you read the story, they put a date on it. A senior UN environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. 20 years ago, it was supposed to be game over. And now we're hearing there's 12 years left. Now, this is not to be a climate change denier. What it is, however, is to point out that people who make predictions, whether they're in climate change, whether they're in Bitcoin, Litecoin, gold, and silver, generally, the highest profile prediction, they may get the most attention, but they're most likely to be wrong. Al Gore, polar caps would be melted by 2005. This one saying if it's not reversed, it's going to be game over by 2000. You got Alexandre Ocasio-Cortez saying we got 12 years to sort this out, otherwise it's game over. And this says coastal flooding and crop failures would create an exodus of eco-refugees, threatening political chaos. Governments have a 10-year window of opportunity to solve greenhouse effect before it spirals out of human control. Ocean levels will rise up by 3 feet. This is 1989, saying by 2000, it's game over. Yep. So whenever you hear game over and game changer, hold on to your wallet, I would say. All right. Now, let's get into this JP Morgan. Are they causing a silver shortage? I mean, well, yes, they're causing a silver shortage according to some, but are they causing a Litecoin shortage? I'm sorry, this is just too funny. There are a lot of people out there that believe these ridiculous game over stories about silver. I saw a YouTube today. Silver shortage guaranteed this decade. Remember we heard also in 2011, greatest wealth transfer ever in history this decade. Yes, well, Litecoin. I mean, you can make this up, and it sounds ridiculous if you make it up about other asset classes. But for whatever reason, the silver pumpers and the gold pumpers and to a certain extent the crypto pumpers, they actually believe a lot of the nonsense that comes out. And they cite it as fact, not realizing that it's complete BS. Game over, game changer. We hear that, right? Greatest wealth transfer in history. That's what silver was supposed to be this decade. It's the same price as it was in 2007. Litecoin shortage. Yeah, silver shortage. That was going to happen too. Guaranteed. Remember, buy a single family home with 500 ounces of silver no later than 2015. Maybe in Detroit. I'm not sure you can buy a house with 500 ounces of silver. Gold backed yuan. You can do this. Gold is money, period. Silver is money. JP Morgan has all these millions of ounces. They bought silver eagles. This is ridiculous. They bought silver maple leafs. Just change it all to Litecoin. Greatest wealth transfer in history, Litecoin shortage. Buy a single family home with one Litecoin. I mean, if I did this and 50 other channels said this, you'd have millions of people believe in this nonsense. The same way they believe this garbage about silver, and they have believed. And then people get annoyed when I point it out. It's 10 years. Oh, manipulation. Oh, they're just early. Okay, well, Litecoin backed yuan. It's coming. Gold backed yuan. Litecoin is money. period. JP Morgan owns 20 million Litecoin, and you cannot prove it is not true. You can't. So therefore, it's true. That's the logic. So stick to your physical illusions of wealth. And we'll all stick to Litecoin because Litecoin is money, period. These people who fall in love with assets or the narratives around them, they really cannot see. And they actually say, I just have to believe that silver is going higher. And you say, why do you have to believe that? And they don't have an answer. How is he going to do that? What magic wand does he have? I mean, they actually say, I have to believe that. I've had many conversations with people that, well, I just have to believe that the gold-silver ratio is too high. And you say, why do you believe that? Well, because they've heard it's too high. And then they give you the you'll see. So they've gone beyond understanding anything other than they've heard something a lot. And the same people will call other people sheeple for not understanding that silver and gold are real money. No, they're as much sheeple as anyone else because they've bought into a narrative. They've never checked it. They've been believing it for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. They don't want to hear anything different. They just want to stick to it. And if the price goes down, good. I can buy more. I'll buy more. Even better. It went down again, even better. Something else went up. That's just a digital illusion of wealth. What do I want but that stuff? Okay. Anyway, so the point is there is no Litecoin shortage that I'm aware of. There is no JP Morgan is buying Litecoin, and that is all I need to know. You can believe that if you want. There's no evidence that JP Morgan has bought Litecoin, that JP Morgan is storing Litecoin, that JP Morgan is going to let Litecoin ride higher. No. All I was doing was pointing out that you can just substitute silver for Litecoin, for gold, for Bitcoin, whatever asset you happen to be tied into a narrative of and wish to believe. All right, game changers. The only thing that's real wealth are mugs, Smaulgld mugs. Remember, mugs don't trade on futures exchanges, so you're not going to get the manipulation that you get in silver and gold and all the other markets. Mugs are real wealth, and the quicker you realize that, the better off you're going to be, because you need mugs. Just ask Lucky. I mean, he gets it. He is smart. I bet he reads Sun Tzu. He understands that mugs are real wealth. We're going to leave Lucky up there for a while. That's Robert Pena's dog there. What a fine animal he is. All right, let's see what you guys are saying over in the comments here. Electric Avenue. All right. Tossing Molotov. Sell Litecoin now and buy silver. Then buy gold, then buy Bitcoin. Grin. And says Litecoin. Now, let's see. Where is Litecoin right now? See, it went down. It was at 53. It's now 51.45. Bob the Monk says, hello, stackers. John Moore says, go Litecoin. Pablo says, hello, mugsters. Yes, the Smaulgld mugsters. Carl Joseph DeMarco is here. Hey, Carl, we forgot, if you missed last night's podcast, we had a special guest. We had, let's see, what was it? See, you didn't send a dog picture, but you did send a picture of your mug, and we did show it last night. I'm going to show this instead because it's better looking. Carl sent us a picture with popcorn in his Smaulgld mug. All right, where else do we got here? Nice mugshot with the popcorn. Oh, so Pablo did see it. Oh, yes. All right, what's up, Ann? Carl Joseph DeMarco, 20,000 Bitcoin would be rocking, getting tired of these threes. Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking, I guess you were here during that, why Litecoin is outperforming Bitcoin in a huge way. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Well, I did give my potential reason was that it's back to buying up the Litecoin. Maybe it's JP Morgan and it's going to be game over. Who knows? John Moore, I love Starbucks. I'll be paying via Bitcoin or Litecoin once this rolls out. Okay. You just like your coffee. John's got a very nice setup with the coffee. I'm going to show you if I can pull it up quickly. I don't know if I'm... He's got here it is. He buys the HODL fuel from a crypto enthusiast who's also selling coffee. He's got a Litecoin Q code where in his office where people can pitch into the kitty to buy the coffee, and then he fills it up in his Smaulgld mug. That's a very nice looking arrangement there. Now, if you don't have a Smaulgld mug, I don't even know why you're listening, because Smaulgld mugs, even James Henry Anderson over at Silver Doctor, that's him right there. That's his mug. He's purchased one. He's looking to get the beer stein. I think it's a smart choice. The beer stein. Smaulgld beer stein. Cracking down, get it? It's very funny, Carl. All right. XRP met with White House officials. Yes. XRP is a different kettle of fish. Different kettle of fish. Bitmain's over 1 million Litecoin. Yep. They own a lot of stuff. All right. Carl Joseph DeMarco. Speaking of Litecoin, Roger and I decided the Litecoin conference stories were all a scam by Bitcoin Ben Axis of Evil. I don't know what they are. Let's see. Isn't 10x unavailable to America? Yes, I believe so. But the idea is, though, that this is happening all over the world, and there's different regulatory structures, but they're all, not all, but most of them are somehow being accommodative to bringing in cryptos into the payment system. It's a prepaid card. Okay. And Holloman, long on drama, short on verifiable. You guys are having a great conversation here. I guess there's nothing for me to comment on. Let's see if there's anything else. If not, we may get out from under an hour. Oh, yes. You guys are talking about the weather, talking to each other. And it looks like, unless I get a question, it's going to be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to sign off, but I am going to leave you with a pitch for the mugs, as I always do around this time. And you can just leave you. There it is. Go to smaulgld.com, buy your classic or super classic mugs. You can pay with Litecoin, you can pay with Bitcoin. The way it's set up is you can pay directly with PayPal. But if you don't want to do that, just shoot me an email, send me the equivalent in Bitcoin or Litecoin to those addresses. Or you can send a check to Smaulgld LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire. Or you can become a Smaulgld patron, or you can make a one-time donation via PayPal. Or you can do your precious metal shoppings at the Smaulgld affiliate links at SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, Gold Legal Coins. I'm starting to move more towards SD Bullion. I've had some issues with, not going to mention, but I've been most satisfied with the SD Bullion experience, and so have our customers. So that link is at the bottom of this YouTube and BitChute. So if you're going to buy, I do get a small commission. That's why I put it up there, but you don't pay any more or less if you visited those sites directly. So please consider doing that. Not investment advice, but if you are going to buy gold or silver, please consider visiting smaulgld.com to do that. You know, through the links on the articles or on the sidebar or below this video, this BitChute Real Video, or on Real Video Bright Neon and YouTube. Also, go to the Smaulgld website and sign up, become a subscriber. It's free. But also, when you go there, you can see all the charts that we discussed the night before. They're a lot easier to see. You can view them at your leisure and follow along. All right, well, thank you very much. Check the comments here. Mugs can sharpen knives, turn mug upside down, and use the ring as a stone. Absolutely. And good, Carl. I'm glad you saw your picture was displayed last night. EC says having a bit of Litecoin wouldn't be a bad thing. And Jake says, I heard somewhere the Litecoin is Bitcoin is to Bitcoin as silver is to gold. That was the supposed concept, the reason it was created. And it makes sense. I think a lot of people are going to hold on to the Bitcoin and spend the Litecoin more. And it's similar to what they did with gold. You could spend gold, but you didn't as much because it was a larger denomination and you tended to store that For those of you who are over 100 years old, you know that. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Remember, we do this each and every night. The Smaulgld mug stackers and game changers come here, and we hash it out. All right. Give Wandels a Smaulgld mug. Good night, everyone.